An honest mistake? President Obama's reaction to the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Iowa manhunt. Police capture a suspect they believe ambushed 2 officers, killing them overnight. White flags. Iraqis welcome troops trying to liberate their city from ISIS. And observing All Souls Day. Pope Francis celebrates Mass at Italy's largest cemetery. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, November 2nd, 2016. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick. The Trump and Clinton campaigns crisscross the country, focusing on battleground states that could decide the election. Our chief White House correspondent and political director, Lauren Ashburn, reports.
It's a race to the finish for presidential challengers Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
We are going to win back the White House.
We need to do everything we possibly can between now and the time the polls close.
And a fight for every vote.
We need more people to vote.
Show up early and vote.
Trump even telling early voters Tuesday in Wisconsin to go and change their vote if they voted for Clinton.
If you live here or in Michigan or Pennsylvania or Minnesota, those 4 places, you can change your vote to Donald Trump.
The latest CNN poll of polls shows Clinton with a 5-point lead over Trump nationally, 47 to 42%. But the race has tightened in key battleground states, which could determine the winner. Clinton is up by only 2 points in Florida. Trump has a slightly larger 5-point lead in Arizona. Clinton has a 4-point advantage in Pennsylvania. Trump is up 6 points in Nevada. Those tight margins have the candidates and their surrogates hitting the battlegrounds hard in the final days. Trump and Vice President Biden are in Florida.
But we have 2 more today in Florida.
Florida.
And Mike Pence is in Arizona.
6 days away from a great victory all across the state of Arizona and all across the United States of America,
where Clinton will also be campaigning late Wednesday night. As practicing Catholics head to the polls, many are weighing their choices and examining their consciences carefully. One well-known Catholic priest in New York City is making the distinction between voting for a flawed candidate and voting for one that enables evil. Father Jerry Rutler says Catholics may not vote for anyone who advocates and enables evil acts, and that includes abortion. Brian?
Thank you, Lauren Ashburn. And President Obama says Hillary Clinton made an honest mistake by using private email as Secretary of State. He says the issue is, in his words, being blown up into just some crazy thing. The FBI closed an earlier investigation without recommending criminal charges, but late last week we learned that investigation has reopened. Republicans claim Clinton can't be trusted with classified information. A major gun maker says sales are soaring as the presidential election looms. Sturm Ruger reports a 66% increase in its third quarter earnings. A surge in FBI background checks also indicates a significant boost in gun sales. Possibly contributing to the spike, concern over tighter gun control if Hillary Clinton is elected president. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. After an overnight manhunt, police arrest a suspect in a pair of fatal ambush-style attacks on 2 Iowa police officers. Wyatt Goolsbee has reaction tonight from the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial here in Washington. Wyatt?
Brian, here in the nation's capital, this pair of shootings is being called a tragedy. Iowa police say the 2 Des Moines area officers were killed while they were sitting in their patrol car, and Attorney General Loretta Lynch condemns the violence.
Now, I know that this is a time of particular tension and mistrust between law enforcement and many communities. But let me be clear, there is no message in murder.
Attorney General Loretta Lynch reacting to the fatal double shooting. Lynch says the Department of Justice will hold accountable anyone who targets police officers. Right now, she says law enforcement need to know they have the American people's support. Des Moines police say the suspect, 46-year-old Scott Michael Green, flagged down an officer early Wednesday morning and turned himself in. This after an 8-hour manhunt. Police say Green is suspected of shooting 2 officers in 2 separate areas just after 1 a.m., one in Des Moines, another in Urbandale, less than 2 miles apart. Since last night's shooting, police are on high alert.
There is a clear and present danger to police officers right now, and we've doubled up our officers. I think Urbandale's taken some of those same precautions. But yeah, there's definitely danger out there right now.
Court records show Green has a history of run-ins with police, including charges of harassment and assault. He is believed to have acted alone. The shootings come during a year that has seen deadly attacks on officers in 2 major cities in the U.S. 5 officers were killed in Dallas on July 7th, and 3 were killed later that month in Baton Rouge. Now, for many Americans, these attacks are a reminder of the dangers law enforcement officers face every day. We're joined now by Craig Floyd. He is the president of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. Craig, you guys do a lot of research on this issue. Tell me, how many police officers have died in the line of duty this year, and what do we know about, has there been an increase in this types of ambush attacks?
115 federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial officers have been killed in the line of duty this year alone. And there are 20,789 names dating back to the earliest death in 1791. Our police officers realize it's a very risky profession. They know, for instance, this year 52 officers have been shot and killed. 16 of them in ambush-style attacks, killed simply because of the uniform that they wear and the job that they do. In fact, if you go back to 2014, we've lost 40 officers now in these targeted killings of men and women who are out there to protect us. And here's the rub for all of us, that if our officers are at risk, all of us are at risk. An attack against law enforcement is an attack against every law-abiding citizen, and we must rally in support of our officers and respect and honor them for what they do for us.
What more do you think in terms of law enforcement and communities can do to sort of bridge tension between those? Because there's been a lot of that, especially during this calendar year.
Without question, and I think all of us, again, need to express outwardly our support and respect for the men and women in law enforcement. We must let people know how outraged we are every time an officer is killed senselessly, like the 2 officers in Iowa sitting in their patrol cars targeted by a man, a weak-minded individual who has probably been influenced in some way by all the anti-cop rhetoric that they've been hearing of late. We should not accept it, and we must rally around our police and in support of public safety.
Craig Floyd, we thank you so much for your time. Again, it's with the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. As Craig mentioned, there's about 20,000 names out here, and it is, of course, open to the public. Brian, we'll toss things back to you.
Wyatt Goolsby, thank you. And civilians in an eastern Mosul neighborhood wave white flags Wednesday as Iraqi special forces advance on the city's outskirts. The guns were mostly silent in Khojaly, just inside Mosul's city limits, but still outside more urban districts. Sporadic rifle cracks could be heard, as well as some Army artillery fire on ISIS positions. Iraqi troops now gear up for house-to-house urban warfare, expected to take weeks and possibly months. An Iraqi family surviving by hiding from ISIS fighters celebrates the liberation of their town near Mosul. This is the town of Tulul al-Nusr. ISIS is no longer here, nor are most of its people. As ISIS left, they forced civilians to go with them, men, women, children, the elderly, as human shields. Assad, his wife, and daughters escaped by hiding in a ditch, while around 500 other families were marched or driven away. His wife, Sadia, says the fighter that came to the door was Syrian.
They told us you're going to have to walk to Hammam Ali, so we knew that the road was long, so we took blankets and bread with us.
Miriam, just 8 years old, says,
they shot over our heads. I was crying.
You can see the route they walked.
When we got there, that was where they killed 3 brothers, and they took the 4th. When we saw them being killed, we stopped, and then they shot around us.
These plains, he says, were all filled with families walking, and this was the ditch that saved their lives. Thick smoke from fires burning at nearby oil wells and a sulfur factory obscured the moonlight and hid them. After 2 nights, even though ISIS was still in the town, they decided to sneak back home. They hid under the staircase for another 2 nights, the children shaking with each gunshot, each explosion.
The army came in the morning, but we didn't know until the evening. The neighbors came and said the army is in the streets. We went out and we were celebrating. We couldn't believe it. We still can't believe it. At night, we are still scared they might come back.
Assad's oldest daughter and her family took another route out of town. Now, sadly, they are among the missing. French authorities bus hundreds of child migrants out of Calais to processing centers around France. The government's trying to bring a definitive end to the notorious migrant camp in the English Channel city. Most of the migrants, mainly teenage boys, lined up calmly to board buses. French authorities transferred more than 5,000 adult migrants out of Calais last week. The 6.6 magnitude quake that hit central Italy Sunday left a number of scars on buildings and monuments in Rome. The strongest quake hit Italy in 36 years, damaging some tourist sites. A marble street lamp just blocks from St. Peter's Square shows quake damage. In Rome's center, the historic church of St. Eustace now has cracks in its walls. Vatican firefighters inspected St. Peter's and 3 other basilicas in Rome, but found no significant damage. Another first for Pope Francis as the Holy Father observes this Feast of All Souls today in Rome. Alan Holdren, Rome Bureau Chief for EWTN's Catholic News Agency, joining us. Alan, where did the Holy Father celebrate Mass for All Souls Day?
Well, Brian, hundreds of people joined the Holy Father for an outdoor Mass in the Prima Porta Cemetery. It's known as the Flaminio Cemetery here in Rome, just about 10 miles to the north of the Vatican, just outside the city limits of Rome. It is the largest cemetery in all of Italy, one of the largest in Europe. It's got different sections, divided up into sections for Catholics, evangelicals, Muslims, and also Jews. Pope John Paul II actually visited the cemetery in 1991 and consecrated a chapel there for Polish pilgrims.
And at today's Mass, the Holy Father speaking from the heart, off the cuff. What did he say about sadness mixed with hope?
He said that when we go to cemeteries, we're filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. Sadness for the obvious reasons of visiting our dead, but also hope in the resurrection of Christ. He said that Christ passed through that door. He made the journey first, dying, but then also rising from the dead. He said that we take comfort in that certainty of the memory of Jesus' words when he said, "I will raise you up on the last day."
So many of the Holy Father's predecessors are buried right there in the Vatican. Did Francis visit those grottos today?
Yeah, he was set to do that just after the Mass. We don't have a live video feed of that. We didn't have any images this afternoon. But it is tradition for the Pope to go into the grottos in the crypts of St. Peter's Basilica, right there near St. Peter's tomb, where many of his predecessors are buried. There are others who are also entombed on the ground floor there, including St. John Paul II. So the Pope goes to visit his predecessors, prays for their souls, and also, according to a Vatican press release today, prays for the souls of all of the deceased. He's also going to be celebrating a Mass on Friday, Brian, for all of the cardinals, 7 cardinals, and 136 bishops that died over the course of the last year.
And quickly, during this month of the Holy Souls, what can we do for those souls in purgatory?
We can always pray, Brian. We take a lead from the Pope himself here on this day of All Souls, praying for those who have gone before us, taking also a little bit of a lesson from what he said at Mass today, hoping in the resurrection and praying for that resurrection of those who have gone before us. Really wise words from the Pope during Mass today.
Thank you. Alan Holdren from EWTN's Catholic News Agency. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Brian.
And Pope Francis reaffirms church teaching on the sacrament of holy orders. Returning from Sweden Tuesday, he was asked about the possible ordination of women. The Holy Father said, quote, "The last word was clear, and that was given by St. John Paul II, who declared in 1994 that the Church has no authority whatsoever to confer priestly ordination on women." Dr. Matthew Bunson, EWTN senior contributor, writes for the National Catholic Register. Expand on this document that the Holy Father referred to, given to us by St. John Paul II.
Yeah, well, St. John Paul II issued this document in 1994, as you noted, in answer to a lot of questions that theologians were raising at the time about whether or not women could, in fact, be ordained. He wanted to make a definitive statement on this, and the result was an apostolic letter. The draft of it, significantly, was formulated by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. So we're seeing already continuity. The letter accomplished 2 important things. On the one hand, as you quoted, it states that the Church has no authority to ordain women. But on the other, it reaffirms, as the document says, the irreplaceable and essential role of women in the life and the mission of the Church. So on the one hand, it restates categorically Church teaching, but on the other, coming from Pope John Paul II, reaffirms the dignity of women. Let's remember, too, that this is the Pope who issued a document called Mulieris Dignitatem that celebrated and explored theologically the dignity of women.
So while women cannot be ordained as priests, the church relies on them and uplifts them.
Uplifts them and relies on them. That's an important point to make, Brian, because the church relies on women to be great disciples, to be saints, to help build society in family and across all of culture.
All right, every time he flies home from a trip, he gets these questions, these hot button issues. Talk a little bit about the language the Holy Father uses to respond to these questions.
Yeah, well, the media often tries to spin Pope Francis as though somehow he's secretly willing and enabling changes in church teaching. Pope Francis is very clear on two key areas in particular. One is the ordination of women, and the other is gender ideology, as he puts it. The two are related, of course. Pope Francis uses a very clear phrase when he refers to the ordination of women. He said, the door is closed. And then, to reiterate, to drive home that point, on this plane coming back from Sweden, what did he do? He referred everyone to John Paul II's apostolic letter, which definitively states exactly what Pope Francis wants us to know.
And upholds the continuity of the papacy. Dr. Matthew Bunson, thank you.
Good to be with you.
Coming up, religious freedom and the election. Pro-life medical professionals see their rights threatened. And 40 Days for Life spreads its pro-life message with a national bus tour. On this Feast of All Souls, thanks for joining us on Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Pro-life clinics and doctors claim they're being forced to violate their faith. As lawsuits work their way through the courts, next week's election plays a key role in the future of religious freedom. Jason Calvi reports from Capitol Hill. Jason?
Brian, who takes control of the White House as well as the Capitol will determine the fate of a number of religious freedom bills. One is the Conscience Protection Act. It protects healthcare workers who refuse to participate in any way in abortion. Another key religious freedom issue, the Supreme Court. Catholic Dr. Marguerite Duane is worried about the future of her profession.
We've seen the attacks on religious freedom, certainly start within the Obama administration, and my fear is, depending on who's elected as our next president, it will only get worse.
Dr. Duane is an adjunct professor at Georgetown and also speaks to medical students across the country.
I got a call from one of those medical students, literally in tears, because she was being berated and bullied by colleagues saying, you can't go into OB unless you're going to be willing to prescribe birth control and perform abortions, because women have a right to have those procedures done.
Lawyer Matt Bowman sees cases like this every day in his work for Christian law firm Alliance Defending Freedom.
The state of Vermont is telling doctors, you have to tell your patients that if you have a terminal illness, one of the treatment options is to kill them and to show them how to get access to that death practice. Then the patients are deprived of the ability to choose a doctor who just focuses on healing.
Near the White House today, Bowman and Dr. Duane talk healthcare, religious freedom, and the 2016 elections.
This issue of religious freedom will be directly taken up by the U.S. Supreme Court, and most likely the next presidential administration will appoint as many as 4 Supreme Court justices who will be on the court perhaps for decades. We have come to a crucial point, a demarcation point in our country, especially with regard to religious freedom. And we need to defend that, as St. John Paul II said, with absolute maximum determination.
Hillary Clinton says she will nominate Supreme Court justices who will stick with Roe v. Wade. Donald Trump is promising pro-life justices. Brian, I should add that Gallup did a poll of voters which they released this month. It found the #1 issue for voters across the country is the economy. The second most important issue, the corruption or the dissatisfaction with the government.
All right, Jason Calvi at the Capitol. Thank you, Jason. The 40 Days for Life fall campaign ends on Sunday, just days before the election. A nationwide bus tour promoting the pro-life effort is in its final days as well. Matt Britton is the 40 Days for Life National Chairman of the Board. What's the focus of the campaign, Matt, on these last days?
We are trying to get through it, #1, and we are focusing on keeping the spirits of the campaign folks, the prayer warriors, we call them, at each of the stops. There were about 270 U.S. vigils, and the tour in 40 days visited 128 of them. So we're really focusing on keeping up their spirits and making sure that they're ready to do a new campaign in Lent until abortion ends on every street corner.
Yeah, every year we have a campaign in Lent and then a fall campaign. This one coincides with the election. I wonder if the bus tour and this renewed emphasis on 40 Days for Life in so many cities is mobilizing pro-life voters.
You know, it gets brought up at every single campaign, we call them campaigns, vigil stops that we've been to, and it also gets up globally. I just got back from the Eastern Europe. And the answer is yes. People are very motivated to get out there and vote this time, and they're telling us that. And they feel as though it's been since probably 25 years is the most important election in the United States, probably since 1992 with regard to pro-life.
Matt, in the absence of federal action, are we making any progress at the state level? I'm sure that you've been to so many states and can kind of give us a barometer of that.
Yes, I think unequivocally. I mean, I think that the states, the pro-life states, have wrapped themselves in glory. I think that there have been around 330 laws in the last 5 years passed limiting or trying to end abortion in the various states, and that has been very successful. I think that in the same period of time, you have seen a closure of an amazing amount of abortion clinics, especially right down through the middle of the country. You know, 40 Days for Life was born and remains in Texas, and so especially in Texas with House Bill 2, but also in Democratic-led states like California, where they've lost 12 abortion centers. And so, yes, in the absence of federal law, the states have done an amazing job at limiting abortion and protecting the lives of those unborn folks.
National Chairman of the Board of 40 Days for Life, Matt Britton, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, remembering All Souls with a Mass celebrated on sacred ground, and an early sign of Christmas as animals are blessed for a living nativity. The 2016 Major League Baseball season ends tonight. Game 7 of the World Series in Cleveland. The Cubs took Game 6 last night, 9-3, thanks to Addison Russell's grand slam. Neither team has won a World Series in decades, more than a century actually for the Cubs, the longest drought in Major League history. There will be a big party one way or the other tonight. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. People in New York City get an early start on Christmas preparations. Cardinal Timothy Dolan blesses animals for a living nativity.
Lord, please bless all who look upon this live Christmas scene here at Radio City Music Hall. Bless the animals and their professional handlers.
The nativity features live camels, donkeys, and sheep. Cardinal Dolan says it exposes a worldwide audience to the simple birth of Jesus in a stable.
The camels always go for me. The sheep, Pope Francis says we're supposed to have the smell of the sheep. See, we're supposed to be shepherds.
Dolan says he hopes visitors to New York City also stop by St. Patrick's Cathedral. I'm sure they will. Praying for the dead is a spiritual work of mercy related to a corporal work of mercy. Mark Irons reports from a place where all souls are remembered all year.
Eric Spencer works in the nation's capital, but his job has nothing to do with politics.
I always look at it that I'm working for the Lord.
For more than 30 years, he's worked in cemeteries.
It's a passion.
In this Jubilee year, Pope Francis calls on the faithful to rediscover the corporal works of mercy, which include burying the dead.
Day in and day out, prepare graves for people to be buried. Our goal is to do that with as much dignity and respect as we can.
Cheryl Taiska is the manager at Mount Olivet Catholic Cemetery in Washington, D.C. She says her job is humbling and goes beyond the corporal work.
We also facilitate the spiritual work of mercy by providing the community here a place to come and pray for the dead.
And it's consecrated ground. Catholic cemeteries are blessed by a bishop, and oftentimes masses are celebrated on the grounds.
Where we celebrate those many.
Today on the Feast of All Souls, Father Cornelius Agiagu says Mass and echoes recent Vatican guidelines about the need for burial in a sacred, church-approved place.
We believe that our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. So the church teaches that they be, even if they're cremated, they be placed in a place recommended by the church, such as this place.
As the church remembers all the souls who have died, Father Cornelius reminds the faithful.
They're living a call to pray for all the deceased loved ones, those we know and those we don't know. Pray for them. And also they're living a call to visit the cemetery.
Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Mark. What a beautiful reminder of what this day is all about. May the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Tonight we leave you with these moments from the Holy Father's All Souls Mass at a Rome cemetery. Good night. God bless you.